Okay, so we're going to devote this class to two sessions, really dealing with the prehistory of our history. And in particular, we'll look at the solar system, which is the group of planets that we're associated with here on Earth. And so keep that in mind as we get through this. There's a whole bunch of references on this that you find on the web, and the numbers are growing with every day. But you can see here we've listed 14 different books here, but there's hundreds and hundreds of books, as you'll see as we get into this. So keep that in mind. So where we start here is with modern astronomy. We currently have an estimate that there's 250 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy and our solar system. Our star is one of those 250 billion stars. And this leads to a different estimate of probably 100 billion planets orbiting those stars. And the age of the Milky Way galaxy is measured in billions of years. So it's not unlikely that many of these planets develop life of some sort. And in some cases, this life spread to other stars on planets on other stars. And so this leads to the conjecture that Earth itself could have been visited in the past, and it could have in fact been seeded by one or more. And the indications are it's probably hundreds of extraterrestrial races, each of which was contributing some genomic diversity. So Earth is a melting pot for many, many places. So that's what it looks like just based on statistics. So now if we follow this through, what we've observed in early 1960s was there was a background radiation everywhere, which was uh, called the cosmic background radiation, and it was equivalent to the temperature of what's called a black body of 2.7 degree Kelvin. So it just created a hiss in radio telescopes that was equivalent to this temperature. And this has been confirmed numerous times since then. The issue that comes up here is that Ron Cowan, under deep meditation, observed the start of our universe.
Why don't you explain it?
And Ron Cowan was a colleague of mine. We worked together for over 3 years, from 2015 and up to his passing on in 2019. And a lot of his observations were the reason for putting this class together. But he observed that the start of our universe was actually a big bounce. That is, that everything compacted together and then bounced. And this led to all of the galaxies flying apart from one another. And I repeatedly pressed him, well, didn't he see a bang? And in this case, it would have been a nuclear fireball. And he was adamant that there wasn't any bang. So it's not impossible, therefore, since everyone has observed this background radiation, which is felt to be a remnant of some sort of bang, that perhaps our universe collided with other universes more than one time, because there's many, many hundreds of billions of universes out there. We're just in one of them. So this is not what you'll find in books. On top of this, this is due to this theory of inflation, where the entity that's the primordial substance that is actually what's going to create all these universes starts to expand very rapidly, and it apparently expands maybe 30 orders of magnitude and then stops. So this leads to spreading all of the matter uniformly across the surface of what we would look at as the sky. And this matches what we see. When we look at the sky, we see stars uniformly scattered. There's no clustering of stars here and black there. And the multiple universes arrive because one piece of it, our universe, inflated and then stopped. But that didn't mean that the rest of the stuff stopped. There were other pieces were inflating and they stopped, and other pieces were inflating and they stopped. And this led to these hundreds of billions of universes that are out there, and so on. So we live in a very complicated panorama of galaxies, universes, and so forth. Now, a lot of what we'll see here tonight is driven by what has come to be called the space age. And on October 4th, 1957, which, as I look at this right now, is 68 years ago.
Happy anniversary.
I remember this very clearly. The Soviet Union launched this satellite here, which is called Sputnik, into orbit. And this was a real wake-up call because the United States and the media in the United States felt the United States was the leader in everything. And all of a sudden, the Soviet Union launches this satellite before the US apparently has put anything into orbit. And the satellite here weighed 184 pounds. And the United States was working on a satellite that was going to weigh 20 pounds. So immediately everybody said, what's going on? And a gigantic crunch occurred where there was a rush. I was part of it to have these school systems all upgrade to handle much more science and math, so that in some sense the United States would catch up with the Soviet Union. And this led to what we had the Apollo mission to the moon. This was the one thing that they felt where the United States could beat the Soviet Union, getting to the moon first. And according to the media, that's what happened. We'll see when we get into this. Maybe it isn't quite so crystal clear. But the end result of this over this period of time is that there's been space probe after space probe launched. We had, 68 years of these things. And so pretty much every planet in the solar system, no exception, has been approached by one or more space probes with all kinds of instruments, in particular cameras. So here's a picture where we're orbiting the moon nearby, and we see a picture of the Earth. This was taken in Christmas time of 1968 from the Apollo 8 mission that was orbiting the moon at that point. And we have over here a picture of the Earth and what it looks like. This is just a graphic to convey this, of the tens of thousands of satellites that are in orbit around the Earth. Just one of these, Starlink, which SpaceX has put over 6,000 satellites into orbit to form a communications network. But there's all kinds of other satellites up there. And so this is a very different picture than in October of 1957, when this was the first thing that got launched. Up to that point, there really weren't a lot of satellites in orbit other than the moon. So this leads to a huge amount of extra knowledge, and we should keep that in mind with all these instruments that are flying around everywhere. So what's come out of this from a variety of sources, what we'll argue for here, and you can look at this book is typical of that, is that our solar system back in time might have actually had 4 habitable oxygen atmosphere planets that had oceans, rivers, and so forth. One of them was called Marduk, and it orbited between Jupiter and Mars. Mars, which orbited between Marduk and the Earth, which was in orbit between Mars and Venus, which was in orbit between Earth and Mercury. So here we have apparently 4 planets, all of which would be capable of having an habitable oxygen atmosphere and oceans. As we sit here today, the only one that still has that is Earth. The others have all been damaged, as we'll see. So what happened to the other ones? Another thing to keep in mind is the media prepared us for this sort of stuff. So there was a movie that came out in 1968 called 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it presented a view that millions of years ago, extraterrestrials visited the Earth. So you see these ape-like creatures here running around, but they left this monolith here, and they, just were close to the monolith, and apparently were led to believe the monolith altered the genetics of these creatures, and they evolved into human beings and went off into space, uh, which is an interesting thing. The key thing in the movie was that on the moon, there was another one of these monoliths. It was buried there, but it had a very distinctive magnetic field, which was spotted by the explorers on the moon. And when they went ahead and uncovered this monolith on the moon for the first time in who knows how long, sunlight struck the monolith, and the monolith sent out some sort of signal to its creators, a wake-up call saying, "Someone's found me, wake up." And of course, this led to the rest of the movie, and so it goes. So this is one thing to keep in mind, preparing you for these things, preparing you for the idea that millions of years ago there were very advanced extraterrestrials that were capable of going through space, uh, putting together something like this that would cause the speed up of evolution and so forth. Another thing to keep in mind here, uh, the 2001: A Space Odyssey was vague on where these extraterrestrials came from. Well, there's no, there's lots of books out now to suggest that, for example, they came from Sirius. As we'll see, there's ties to Egypt and to a tribe in Mali called the Dogon in Africa. So Sirius could be one place. There's the Pleiades, and this resonates with the Lord of the Rings, with the creatures that we see there in Lord of the Rings. Some of them might have come from Aldebaran. After World War I, there was a society in Germany that claimed that they were in contact with entities from Aldebaran, and this led them to building a spaceship that stimulated the rest of the Germany to try and follow and copy and take over this sort of technology. We have the belt of Orion here, which has a distinctive set of stars, and those stars in the belt that have these names here, apparently visitors from those stars could have come to Earth. And then there's many, many more. So current estimates are there were at least 500 contacts with extraterrestrial races with Earth at some stage over the millennia. No one knows how far back in time, a billion years, no one knows. Uh, there's a mystic, Madame Blavatsky, who was self-educated, and she spoke of the masters or guardians that were on all the planets of the solar system, not just on Earth, but on all the planets. And these masters or guardians encompassed at least 5 conscious races from other stars that wanted to populate the solar system with a new race of loving and compassionate sentient entities. And that's a common theme that comes up in these things is apparently many of these extraterrestrial races want to contribute their genome to the human genome, which makes people on Earth unique. Madame Blavatsky spent a great deal of time talking about Isis, for example, in Egypt and the Temple of Isis, and how that tied into this. So again, we're not the only ones saying this. There are many, many other people. Uh, the one thing that Madame Blavatsky did talk about was she had gone and met these masters of wisdom in an underground city, which was called Shambhala. And she wrote a book on all this, their visit there to the land of the gods, the long hidden story of visiting them. And Shambhala is also called Shangri-La by other people, but it's a very popular place. And that in times past, Madame Blavatsky said there was a single unifying faith or mystery that was an integral part of daily life. And this has been lost today. She's saying this in the year roughly 1900, but she foresaw that it would return in times to come, that this faith, this spirituality would become an integral part of daily life. And the grand masters of wisdom are there and they guard humanity, protect it, and guide it so that it can achieve a higher level of consciousness or an ascension in order to achieve these things. So we'll see. Uh, there's a gentleman called Ishmael Perez who has put out several books. This is one of them. And he has a very active YouTube channel. Typically, when he does his sessions twice a week, he'll have 3,000 people watching what he's saying. But what he's argued here is that this book that he wrote is the true history, true history of Earth, and all the different cycles. There were this species that came to Earth and stimulated uh, a cycle of civilization, which then apparently collapsed. And this happened again and again and again. There were many, many, many cycles. The most recent one was the cycle of Atlantis, which was apparently very successful, but apparently was subverted by some evil alien species that took it down. And we're picking up the pieces from that today. And that's what he claims in this book. But there's a greater organization in the cosmos that has councils upon councils, and they coordinate and do all kinds of different things. And so that appears to be a common theme in all these things, is that there's groups of civilizations that get together and they have common interests and they work together and they run into conflict with others, but there's always council upon council upon council. They're trying to make some decisions about what to do. And that seems to be, how all of these decisions are made. So let's go back to this planet, but that was supposedly was between Mars and Jupiter. Some people call it Marduk. There are other names for it, but what happened, what stimulated this was a gentleman at the U.S. Naval Observatory in Bethesda, Maryland, Washington, D.C., Thomas von Fladden, decided to use computers, and he plotted the trajectories of many asteroids and comets in our solar system. And since he was following these trajectories, he decided to follow them backward in time. And this led him to realize that roughly 3 million years ago, a lot of these asteroids and comets emerged from a common place. This is what would be called this planet Marduk. It apparently was 4 times the size of the Earth, but it blew up, and all that's left of us now are remnants, which is what we call the asteroid belt today. But apparently this planet had sentient species on it and oceans and everything else, and it's gone. The planet blew itself up or someone else blew it up. We don't know what happened. We go to Mars, and Mars is always been involved in all kinds of things, such as we have lots of music related to Mars and what happens there. But there's been enough probes now, satellite probes, that have gone to Mars and been involved in it since the 1970s, 1960s even. And the net outcome of all this stuff is that there's been a lot of measurements of isotopes of a variety of atomic elements. And this suggests that Mars had a nuclear war perhaps 3 million years ago. Maybe there was some relationship between the nuclear war that Mars had and why Marduk blew up. We don't know. But because of this, it's compounded by the fact that Mars evidently was hit by a major asteroid that removed roughly 1/3 of the mass of the planet about 800,000 years ago. And so not only was there a nuclear war on Mars, but this asteroid crunched everything. And so Mars does indeed appear to have had oceans, rivers, sentient people even, and with a breathable atmosphere and so forth. But because of what happened here, Mars has now been turned into a desert planet. Okay. And the structures on Mars from that civilization are quite similar to those that are found in Mesoamerica with the Maya and the Olmec in Central America. That's based on, again, satellite photos that are taken. Here's a picture of an object that's actually in on the Martian surface. It looks like a face. And of course, many people say, well, you're just making this up. You see a face here, but it appears because it's part of a complex of buildings, this really is a face. And we don't understand why. We're going to have to go see, but this is the nature of what was on Mars. Mars was a perfectly habitable planet, and it's now gone. Then skipping over Earth, we go to Venus, and Venus in an earlier point in time might have been covered with oceans and rivers, but there is apparently some sort of carbon dioxide thermal runaway that occurred. And the carbon dioxide gets trapped, then the energy from the sunlight comes in and will hit the surface of Venus. But when it bounces back towards space, the carbon dioxide will trap it, keep it there. And this keeps cranking the temperature up so that the temperature on Venus appears to be roughly 700 degrees centigrade, which is where it is today. And that's good enough for melting lead, for example. And so this thermal runaway would have evaporated all the water that was on the surface of Venus. And what we think today is that there's probably energetic entities, probably made up of dark matter, which themselves simply get energized by heat, by being shaken. Heat will do that. It will make you vibrate very rapidly. And so while it's not possible for us to live there, there's probably a lot of these energetic entities that live there, and they're very happy. Then we have the Sumerians and the Egyptians now when we turn to Earth finally. And long before them, there was an advanced civilization of humans that lived in southern Africa, and they mined gold. So here's an example of what they left as their ruins. There are more than 10 million stone circles that are ruined there, that are connected to one another, that make up the largest cluster of stone ruins found anywhere on Earth to date. So this is not something that's would just come about through nature. This is clearly something that's been constructed, and the tools and the artifacts that were dug up here show they had a deep understanding of sound and resonance, and used this to power their tools, and also used it as a source of energy. So we go to southern Africa, we come up with this, and then we go up. Just to close this out, they carved the first statue of Horus, the first Sphinx, and they built the first pyramids and built a stone calendar right in the heart of everything here. So this calendar is the flagship among millions of these ruins. There's ancient channels, there's agricultural terrace, and thousands of ancient mines mysterious tools and artifacts, all left behind by a alien race has been called the Anunnaki. They've disappeared. We don't know where they went, but they're the ones that created this. To further compound this, Michael Cremo has spent decades documenting thousands of examples, not a few, thousands, that human origins go back hundreds of millions of years. And on the other hand, there could very well be some evidence of time travel across timelines when you find a perfectly good wrench in a coal seam that was created hundreds of millions of years ago. Where in the world did this wrench come from? So he has example after example for you to see this. But let's look at the examples. A gold chain that's embedded in a lump of coal that dates back roughly 300,000 years. A gold chain, this is not something intangible. An engraved shell that showed a human face on it that was dated back to 2 million years ago. There's spearheads that are embedded in a woolly rhinoceros's bone that date back to 2 to 3 million years ago. And then there's a human footprint in Jurassic rock, human footprint now, that dates back to 150 million years ago, and another in sandstone that dates back to 300 million years ago. So there's a lot of prehistory we're not aware of, that things are going on, and they left evidence that they were here, but that's all we know. We touched on the Dogon, who are in Mali in West Africa. They have some unique art, but they have very advanced cosmology, and they have a creation story that describes how this one true God that they call Nama created all the matter in the universe. And interestingly, the myths that depict these creative efforts bear a striking resemblance to the modern definitions of matter. But in many of the Dogon words, symbols, and rituals that are used to describe the structure of matter are quite similar to those found in ancient Egypt and in the daily rituals of Judaism. So, for example, the modern scientific depiction of the informed universe as a black hole is identical to Amma's egg of the Dogon and the Egyptian Ben stone. So the Dogon are who they are. And the thing to keep in mind here, there were other groups here, another group in Ghana, in the Cote d'Ivoire, and also in Togoland, that had similar observations, and they all talked about the Sirius star system. Now, the Sirius star system is unusual in that it has 3 stars in it, only one of which is visible with modern telescopes. The other 2 only recently have been able to be seen due to advances in telescopes. But all of these people here in Western Africa all said that Sirius had 3 stars there. Okay, well, how in the world did they see this? So the indications are that someone from Sirius visited them or communicated with them to let them know that. But you can read the book to judge for yourself how credible this is. We have the Great Pyramids in Egypt that have been there for a long time. So one individual, John Anthony West, looked at the 3 Great Pyramids that are in Giza, and he was able to look at them, and the spacing between these pyramids matched that of the 3 major stars in the belt of the constellation Orion, except that they're not how the stars are located today. They're located in 8000 BC. So maybe the pyramids were actually built in 8000 BC. But if that's the case, who in the world built them? And is there any relationship here to Sirius? Because this is the belt of Sirius, these 3 stars that make this thing up. So you can look at his books and judge for yourself. And then we go back to Atlantis, which was simply the latest in a number of these cycles. Apparently, Atlantis had over 200,000 years of history, and there were at least 4 restarts in Atlantis, an up and a down and up and a down. And the final restart lasted for thousands of years, but apparently was undone by divisions in Atlantis that led to Atlantis destroying itself. And it's conjectured that these divisions were due to extraterrestrial that wanted to do Atlantis in. So Atlantis right now is the highest point in recent times of human activity on Earth. There were others, such as Hyperborea, Mu, Lemuria, before Atlantis, but Atlantis went beyond them all and apparently created a global civilization. So, in short, it's not implausible that Earth could have been settled by these extraterrestrials. And we have a book called the Enuma Elish, which is about 1,000 lines long and is found in Acadia, which is in Mesopotamia in the Middle East. It's on 7 clay tablets. Each of them has 150 to 170 lines of cuneiforms, and most of the tablet 5 has never been recovered, but the text is almost complete. And what does this text say? It describes the creation of the world, a battle between gods focused on the offering to Marduk. That's again the name of this planet that was supposedly between Mars and Jupiter in orbit. The creation of man that was destined for service of these entities. So man was created to do the work that these deities didn't want to do themselves. And there's a lot of praise for Marduk. So having said that, this triggered a variety of activities, and one king, Nebuchadnezzar, was actively involved in resurrecting this and trying to understand where all this stuff came from, which is why we know about it today. But it did lead to an epic poem called Gilgamesh, which was Gilgamesh is introduced as an entity that is 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal. And so at the beginning of the poem, he's described as a brutal, oppressive ruler. And this is usually interpreted to mean either that there was forced labor or sexual exploitation. And as punishment for this cruelty, the god Anu created a wild man, Enkidu, who, after being tamed by a prostitute named Shamhat, Enkidu journeys to Uruk to confront Gilgamesh. And these two men wrestle. And although Gilgamesh wins in the end, he's so impressed by his opponent's strength and tenacity, they become close friends. And in the ancient Sumerian text, Enkidu is Gilgamesh's servant, but in the Epic of Gilgamesh, they're companions of equal standing. So if we continue through the tablets, we'll see that Gilgamesh and Enkidu travel to the cedar forest, which is guarded by the Humbaba, or the Akkadian name for Huwawa. And the heroes cross the 7 mountains to the cedar forest, where they begin chopping down trees. And now they're confronted by Humbaba, and Gilgamesh panics and prays to Shema, the Eastern Semitic name for Utu, who blows 8 winds in Humbala's eyes, blinding him. Humbala begs for mercy, but the heroes decapitate him. In Tablet 6, Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, where Ishtar, the Akkadian name for Inanna, comes to him and demands him as her consort, and Gilgamesh rejects her, reproaching her mistreatment of all of her former lovers. So in revenge, Ishtar goes to her father, Anu, and demands that he give her the bull of heaven, which he sends to attack Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh and Enkidu kill the bull and offer its heart to Shamash. While Gilgamesh and Enkidu are resting, Ishtar stands up on the walls of Uruk and curses Gilgamesh. Enkidu tears off the bull's right thigh and throws it in Ishtar's face, saying, if I could lay my hands on you, it is thus that I would do this to you and lash your entrails to your side. And Ishtar calls together the cramped courtesans, prostitutes, and harlots and orders them to mourn for the bull of heaven. And meanwhile, Gilgamesh holds celebration over the bull's defeat.
This sounds like the precession of the equinoxes being referenced.
It does, yeah. And then we get the tablet 7, where Enkidu is recounting in a dream he saw Anu, Ea, and Shamash, and they declared that either Gilgamesh or Enkidu must die to avenge the bull of heaven. So they chose Enkidu, who soon grows sick. He has a dream of the underworld and then dies. And in tablet 8, we learn that Gilgamesh's inconsolable grief for his friend and the details of his funeral. In tablets 9 through 11, we relate to how Gilgamesh is driven by grief and fear of his own mortality and travels a great distance and overcomes many obstacles to find the home of Umpatasham, the sole survivor of the Great Flood, who was rewarded with immortality by the gods. So the journey to Utnapishtim involves a series of episodic challenges, probably originated as a major independent adventure, but in the epic they are reduced to fairly harmless incidents. So first, Gilgamesh encounters and slays lions in the mountain pass. Upon reaching the mountain of Mashu, Gilgamesh encounters a scorpion man and his wife, and their bodies flash with terrifying radiance. Once Gilgamesh tells them his purpose, they allow him to pass on, and so on and so on.
Sounds again like going through the zodiac.
So that takes us to the end here. We hope you've enjoyed this, and we're going to take a break, and we will start up shortly. So have a good, and we will take it from there.